Hi everyone, my name is Kayla and welcome back to Kay's Hidden Shelf where we talk about books. Today I'm going to be sharing with you everything I read back in August. I only read 3 books back in August, or at least finished 3 books in August, and I don't have a review for all of them, only 2. So the third one, I'll explain why once I get to talking about it a little bit more. But let's go ahead and see what I read back in August. First up is Springtide Harvest by J.D. Mitchell. This is a review copy that I did receive in exchange for an honest review, and I was actually feeling a bit bogged down by my reading at the time that I picked this up. And it was so refreshing and so much fun, so I'm really excited to talk about it. This is a self-published fantasy that brings in different elements from fantasy, including classic fantasy, as I mentioned, but also dungeon crawler and even D&D inspirations. This just encompasses fun storytelling with high stakes while bringing a refreshing take to classic fantasy tropes. The story here follows 2 main characters. The first is a overconfident yet naive young man named Haskell, who longs to follow in the footsteps of his grandfather and become a quester. In order to do this, he runs away from home and pulls together a ragtag crew, promising them the treasure and glory of legends. Among the crew that Haskell hires is a young girl named Froba. She's tough, but a street urchin who is focused on survival. Only the stories didn't tell Haskell everything, and Froba knows the odds are stacked against them. This is a great character study that does delve into darker topics and serious tones while still managing to keep it fun. I think a big reason that J.D. Mitchell was able to pull this off was his choice of the 2 main characters. Haskell is a carefree dreamer and Froba is a pessimist. I couldn't help but smile at Haskell's bright personality or face the grim reality that was Froba's perspective. The motley crew that forms out of this also emphasizes these attributes while adding a nice found family feeling throughout the story. Overall, I became invested in the characters' arcs and found their development satisfying. Another reason this worked so well for me was the world. It was familiar and nostalgic with dungeon crawler and D&D elements, with wizards, magic, orcs, goblins, and even a guild responsible for protecting the city. There were plenty of Easter eggs to be found. In terms of pacing, it does shift from medium to fast throughout, with plenty of action and scheming. There was always something keeping me engaged in the story, from the scheming between characters to the unexpected plot developments. While featuring the coming of age and quest tropes, this also covers themes of self-discovery, war, friendship, poverty, addiction, and the consequences of pride. While the story does show these darker themes and topics, I never felt bogged down by it. It's told in such a way that does show them and shows their impacts on the characters, but never goes in such depth with them that it feels too heavy for the reader. The storytelling in this was immersive, and the author's choices felt purposeful throughout the story. The nice thing with this as well is it reads as a standalone with the possibility of continuation into a series. So if you are looking for more standalone stories, this is definitely one to add to your list. Overall, I give this 4 out of 5 stars. I think this would make a great slump buster for any fantasy reader out there who also loves D&D inspiration as well as dungeon crawler elements and has a fast-paced adventure with great character work. After that, I read The Spider Key by Jacqueline Hagan. You knew this was gonna come up. I loved The Wickwire Watch, and I'm already going to tell you offhand, I absolutely love this as well, and it left me with a really hard choice at the end. If you have not read The Wickwire Watch and you're the type of reader that doesn't like to hear spoilers or even hints to the first book in a series when hearing reviews for the sequel or another book in the series, by all means, skip this. I am going to try and keep this as spoiler-free as possible, but know offhand, it is another 5-star read, and yes, you should read this series. This was just an enthralling sequel, and the author delivers yet another masterful story within the Riverfall Chronicles. For me, it's always a joy when I come across a book or series that I don't want to put down, invests me into the characters, easily immerses me into the world, leaves me internally screaming and eager for the next book. So far, Jacqueline Hagan has delivered on this twice. The Spider Key helped to solidify and build on the characters we get to know from the Wickwire Watch. further investing me in their circumstances, seeing how they've become who they are today while still building doubt about their intentions and their past. The variety of characters we see is well balanced, and each one felt nuanced, with quirky, charming, conniving, rough, capable, endearing, or even morally gray characters throughout this cast. From their good and bad traits, I've come to love the cast of characters that we've met and the found family that's been built. One thing I was excited for in this was further exploration of the world and the magic. As the characters travel, we get to see more about the towns, the history of the world, along with the players within the plot. There's also no shortage of emotionally evoking scenes in this, from intense or wholesome moments to suspense and emotional damage. There was a lot to process in this. Despite how much there was to process, I had a hard time putting this book down. Between the character growth, the plot developments, and the intensity of these scenes, this was a mesmerizing read. The Spider Key also shows where the author's writing skills have grown in various aspects, most notably in pacing and storytelling. The story progression and pacing were spot on, with masterful storytelling, and wove plenty of breadcrumbs in to keep readers theorizing. As the stakes get higher in this, the characters are faced with harder choices and increased danger. Something else I appreciated in this was the inclusion of more action without taking away from the characters or the story. Now, the biggest surprise was just how dark the author was willing to go, showing the severity of those high stakes. This was a fast-paced adventure that gave small breathers in between as well. All of this demonstrates incredible skill to create satisfying character and plot developments while still shrouding them in mystery, to get readers to root for these characters while still sowing doubt about them and their intentions, along with spot-on pacing, seamless blending of multiple subgenres, and artfully expanding the world. That's hard to do, and Jacqueline Hagan pulls it off. So far, this series has been an immersive read that's hit the mark and become a new favorite for me. This is how you write stories that keep readers coming back, at least this reader. But wait, I said it left me with a problem, and yes, it did. The problem being, when do I start book 3? The way this left off, I would have picked up The Blue Flames, book 3 in the series right away, but the problem I was presented with is that if book 3 ends in the same way as this, book 4 isn't going to be out, I believe, until late spring, early summer next year, potentially. So how long do I want to suffer without the next book in the series ready on my shelf to read? I know it's not that big of a problem, but it is still a problem. When do I pick up book 3, and how long do I potentially want to suffer without the next book in the series? Of course, I give this 5 out of 5 stars, and this is definitely a series you don't want to sleep on. Last but not least, I read The Bone Ships by R.J. Barker. This is book 1 in the Tide Child trilogy. Now, I technically haven't written my full review for this one yet, and the reason being is that I'm tempted to wait until I finish the trilogy and potentially do a full trilogy review on the channel for this, as well as updating my written reviews, which are there, they're just shorter than they normally are. Partly the reason why my review is shorter is that I've actually had a harder time articulating how I feel about this book, mainly because I didn't quite settle into the world on this series until I read book 2, which I finished in September. Don't get me wrong, the story, the characters, it was all fantastic and well done. The world is unique, it's refreshing, it's unlike anything I've read, and it centers around a nautical theme, which I love in fantasy. The story here is told from one point of view, Joran Twiner, who is shipwife to the Tide Child, a black ship where criminals and unwanted end up. He's quickly met by Lucky Mies, who challenges him for control of Tide Child and his shipwife's status. In ancient times within this world, dragons, or better known as Kishans, were hunted for their bones, the bones being crafted into ships that allowed two nations to war with one another. Centuries later, the Kishans have vanished, but one has been spotted after all this time, and both nations see an opportunity to shift power in the war. For me, this artfully wove two character story through one POV. This is just as much Lucky Misa's story as it is Jordan Twiner's. The world felt unique, it felt refreshing, and even so much so that it took me until book 2 to really settle into the world and have a better understanding of it. There's just so much to the world building, and while it is built in seamlessly to the story, it still took me some time to settle into it and feel more comfortable with terms and creatures and you name it. The storytelling, the character developments, and their dynamics were captivating. Honestly, I had a hard time putting this book down, and I quickly dove into book 2. Another benefit with this being told through Jordan's point of view only is that it leaves so much mystery. He's not aware of everything or all the purposes behind the choices that are made in the story, and we get to learn alongside him, and I loved that experience. Along with that, the world building also has wizard birds, which ended up becoming my favorite characters by the time I was done reading this. So I would highly recommend, if you're looking for a nautical fantasy that is unique, refreshing, has a captivating take on storytelling, and immerses you into that world, I'd highly recommend checking out this series. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. This was a solid introduction to the series, and I can already tell you that The Call of the Bone Ships Book 2 only gets better. So that is everything I read back in August. While I only finished 3 books, I did have a couple others that ended up carrying into September, so I'm really excited to talk about those with you as well, as they ended up being some really intriguing reads. I'd love to know though, did any of these stand out to you? Did you have a new favorite or a surprise read in August? Leave your comments down below. I always love hearing from you. As always, thank you so much for watching, and take care of yourselves.